right. Hello, everybody. My name is Brad Wolf. I am the executive director and resident musician this evening for the first Reimagine Vigil of 2024. Welcome to this new year, to a new opportunity for growth, for healing, for connection, for love, for processing all that life has in store. And we are so grateful to be here with some wonderful featured guests that we will be introducing soon this evening. And really, thank you. This year, as we all know, we have 366 days to hold space for one another. So very grateful for some extra room to be with you. And for you who have joined us this evening, just to say how nice and meaningful it is to start the year off with ritual. That we've been hosting these vigils now for I think 3 years or such, every month. And in these spaces, we have the opportunity to reflect on what's happening in the world, what's happening in our own lives, and to have a space in community to really metabolize some of that, or just be with it, because there's not too many spaces where there, in a world of so much division and so much mounting pain, just to have a space to be together with people who understand that we have to acknowledge it to move through it, and only in community can we really heal ourselves and the world. And so what Reimagine's about, for those of you who are new to us to start the year, we're really about transforming the hard parts of life, loss, adversity, and mortality, transforming it into presence, into, and I have a slide here, which you'll see, for, what is a relationship between loss and love? We see that there is that relationship. There's a relationship between injustice but equality, and this is the world we want to create. We want to find growth in our pain, find community through what often could be isolating, and transform our suffering into service, and also to be with what is hard. We're not trying to say it's not okay to have these feelings, but we can both simultaneously be in our pain and grow from it in the same exact breath. And that's what we want to really begin doing here this evening with each of you, to reimagine together. And so what I'd like to share with you now is a little bit of background about the event itself. Most of you are very familiar now with Zoom, but just a couple quickies. First of all, for those of you who are unaware of the closed captioning, that's a really great option if you'd like to see the words across the screen as our guests speak. In the background here, you see a candle, and we are going to be hosting a candle lighting and honor ceremony. So this is your time, if you don't already have a candle handy, to go find a candle, and wherever you are, if you can grab one. If not, it's okay, but this is the time and the moment to grab that candle, and we'll be lighting them together in just a couple minutes. We really encourage you to keep your camera on so we can see your faces and make this as human an experience as possible. So thank you, but if you can't, it's okay as well. And then we are going to be muted until the end, perhaps, when we may have some opportunities for questions. We've rarely had time for a breakout, but you never know what can happen at the end of these sessions. So if you do have questions, you can use the chat, and I'd like to get that chat started right now, if you may. Love it if everyone would introduce themselves, where you're calling in from, and what your hope is for this evening, or day, depending on where you are in the world. What are you hoping out of this occasion together? It would be great to hear about some of those hopes, and we can see that we all are filled with some kind of hope, even if that hope is for the next few minutes or for the next bit of our lives. So let me see if there's anything else I want to share before we get going. I do want to make sure that we talk about the kind of space that we are going to be co-creating tonight. We introduced a set of principles. Really, as we've seen more recently, it used to be such that we felt that our world sadly needed tragedy to bring us together. But now, even war, even tragedy, even pain doesn't seem to bring people together. That we need to really find ways in our own hearts and minds to make that connection across boundaries happen. And so, for that to be the case here, we have some principles that I'd like to share with you about what kind of space this is. Andy, are you there?
I'm here.
I would love it if you would help me read some of these principles so my voice doesn't just drone on. If you wouldn't mind reading this page of principles.
Sure. What kind of space this is? A grieving space. Despite our varied backgrounds and beliefs, we can unite in sorrow. A compassionate space. Our compass points towards mourning loss and widening our hearts with love. A brave space. In a time where fear is rampant, simply showing up with and for others from diverse walks of life is an act of courage. An imperfect space. Acknowledging our limitations, we approach with humility, knowing that our words might fall short.
Thank you, Andy. I do want to highlight this brave space. The idea that you by just showing up here in this space with all of us, that is an act of courage in and of itself. And thank you so much for paving the way for what the world could be like if we all took that risk to show up in a vulnerable community with one another with love in our hearts. And I also want to share, what kind of space this is not. That's important as well. This is not a blaming space. Today is simply for being with ourselves and others amidst what's hard. This is not a political space. And while every action and inaction, as we've seen, can be viewed through the lens of politics, our intention here is to really step beyond those boundaries and try to be apolitical. This is not a religious space. And so it's true that while religion really provides solace for so many of us, this gathering remains neutral with the idea that we want to respect all faiths and people of no faith. And finally, this is not a solution space. These vigils are about bearing witness to our collective pain and not really here to seek remedy. And so if these principles are okay with you, we will proceed. If anyone feels like this doesn't fit where they are tonight, and you can't grapple with these principles together, then this is a great time to use the rule of 2 feet or one mouse click, and it's okay to leave. But we're so grateful for all of you for being here. And so now I want to share a little bit about what's happening. Again, I'm Brad. Zubin Desai, thank you so much for that gorgeous altar in Hawaii that you've constructed for us this evening. It really carries that aloha spirit, and it will be a centerpiece of our virtual vigil this evening. We're about to engage in our ceremony, our candle lighting, so get ready for that. And then we're going to have our sacred conversation between Pixie and Elizabeth, who we'll introduce soon, and then our fabulous honor ceremony. Finally, the extinguishing, and then we'll wrap it up together. And can't wait for all of these moments. And so with that, let us get into our candle lighting. I'm gonna put my guitar down and let's all grab our candles and a match if that's what you have to light your candle. And let's get those candles, let's get them lit. And now, as we do so, I would like to invite 3 of our incredible Reimagine colleagues, Andy, Dara, and Zubin, to each read this candle lighting blessing you see on the screen. We'll read it collectively as a group. So though we might not be able to hear you, this is the perfect time to speak out loud these words with us and feel the connection to what this event is about.
By lighting our candles, we mourn division, terrorism, murder, war, trauma, hatred, and all that is disconnected from love. We honor our personal dead, the dead across the world, and all of us still here together.
By lighting our candles, we mourn division, terrorism, murder, war, trauma, hatred, and all that is disconnected from love. We honor our personal dead, the dead across the world, and all of us still here together.
By lighting our candles, we mourn division, terrorism, murder, war, trauma, hatred, and all that is disconnected from love. We honor our personal dead, the dead across the world, and all of us still here together.
Now I am going to turn the computer to gallery mode. I don't know if you all can see all these. It's so great to see all of your faces out there. On the top right, there's something called gallery mode. You can click your view and you can start seeing the little squares of new friends from across the country. And now is the time with our candles lit. This is something we like to do, to hold your candle up to the screen if you have a candle lit, and just find somebody else out there. I see two. I'm going to focus my attention. Everyone, you'll find your own person out there. I see Brittany Ballard, perhaps, I'm not sure, and two wonderful looking folks there. And I'm going to just focus on that square and send just some loving kindness in my heart. Three of you now in that square. How nice. Send some loving kindness to you, and think in my own heart some intention that I have for you, even though I don't know you. Now let's all find somebody out there and focus on them, and let's take 20 seconds or so in silence and just think positive intentions while looking at that one square in your heart. Okay, thank you, everybody. It's so, it's so rare even to take 20 seconds to make eye contact with a stranger in this world, and do it with love in your heart, intention, just 20 seconds out of our day. And so just imagine now, if we take the intention we had for that one person, or in my case, three people, how wonderful is that? And spread that intention not just to that one square, but to everybody on the screen. I'm looking at all of you and wanting to hold that intention, and then thinking about spreading that intention to the whole world. And what if we could all do that in our own little corner of the universe, more than these 20 seconds? But these 20 seconds are a great start for this space, and we can put our candles now down, keep them lit, and we can really hold space for one another and the sacred conversation that we are about to introduce before us now. So with that in mind, so many of us I see in the chat, there's grief. People are here to learn how to cope, how to be with pain. I'm seeing Olga from San Francisco, from Miami, Florida, hoping to learn how to cope with my grief. Hoping for a container to process some recent grief after moving away from my community. Thank you, Amanda. From Michigan, wanting a space and a ritual to help get through grief, while also providing place to honor my husband. All of you, for whatever reason you're here, that is the right reason. And we are holding space for all of it this evening. And to help us hold that space, it's my privilege to introduce Pixie Lighthorse, best known for the Prayers of Honoring series, written to restore bonds between people and nature while healing interior patterning and the spiritual and religious trauma. Now, The Wound Makes Us the Medicine is her newest and really most personal book. Using thought and prose, it's a collection of remedies that centers on the challenges of suffering and heartache, and offers affirmations for seeing pain through rather than avoiding. Pixie has shared that when she lost a pregnancy in 2002, she was blessed to be surrounded by a pack of elder women who made a healing space around her with love, life, knowledge, and compassion. She grew up amid farms, ranches, animals, and wildlife in the San Joaquin Valley of California. She is an enrolled member of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma and writes as Lighthorse to honor the unheard voices of her ancestors. She received training as a healer between 1999 and 2012 and currently studies Indigenous liberation and sovereignty at Oregon State University. And so grateful to have you here. Of course, want to honor and acknowledge the land that we're all on as well. Myself in San Francisco on the land of the Ohlone. And I know that maybe Andy has a map somewhere that we could drop in if anyone else wants to find and acknowledge the land that we are on now that was stewarded initially by others. And so thank you, first of all, for being here, Pixie. It means so much to us. And you're going to be in conversation today with Elizabeth Johnson, the co-founder and executive director of the Peaceful Presence Project, an organization that transforms the way that communities talk about, plan for, and experience the last stage of life. Now, with a master's degree in community and urban planning, Elizabeth has traveled the globe as an educator and facilitator, awakening her fascination with the cultural and social contexts which shape human understanding of the mysteries of life and death. She's a member of the board of directors of the Central Oregon Council on Aging and a former board member of the National End of Life Doula Alliance, an organization we love. She's very passionate about integrating death and grief literacy initiatives in local communities and encouraging honest dialogue around the complexities of the dying process. In the past, Peaceful Presence Project has hosted workshops on Reimagine's platform, including a discussion of what's known as advanced directives and planning for how we want to face our own end of life, and a legacy workshop using love letters and life song. So really, as you in the chat have shared the subject matter that's coming up for you there, we have two guests here that are really the perfect space holders for us. And so with that in mind, I do want to ask, given this is an honor ceremony, and I'll turn it over to you, Elizabeth, just if you would share who or what you're honoring in this space this evening.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Reimagine, for having Pixie and I here just to share a bit of what's on our hearts right now. I am honoring a dear friend, Karen, who died in the past year, and to me was just an embodiment of somebody who navigated really complex mental, emotional, physical realities, yet always pulled upon the creative threads of life to keep her present and to engage in a way all the way through her last breath. So she was a real inspiration to me. Thank you.
And Pixie, I mean, if you want to share as well, as just as an opening, and then I'll cede my square to the two of you.
Thanks, Brad. Thanks to Reimagine for having Elizabeth and I here. What a pleasure to be in this space. I am honoring the death of two of my preborn children, Charlotte and Fox. And I'm also here honoring the recent death of my father, Donnie. He died mid-November, kind of suddenly. And so I'm here with fresh grief. And I'm just here to honor myself and them and all of us.
Well, we honor both all these losses you just described, and thank you so much. And we all collectively hold sacred space for you and for each other. So thank you, and look forward to hearing what's to come.
Thank you. Okay, well, welcome. Elizabeth and I are very excited to talk to you tonight. We have been in discussion about some of the things that we'd like to talk to you about and how to really take up some space here around the things that we spend an awful lot of time professionally and personally interacting with. As Brad said, I wrote a book that came out in December called The Wound Makes the Medicine. It's Elemental Remediations for Transforming Heartache by Row House Publishing and printed and distributed by Simon & Schuster. It was a great pleasure to write this little book, and I'll be reading some excerpts from it tonight for you. Elizabeth and I have kind of an interesting story. Several years ago, it was just at the beginning of the big COVID frenzy. We had a friend who was dying of cancer, who, I'm just going to tell the story a little bit, if that's okay, Elizabeth. Okay, so in conversation with her, as I started to visit her dying bed, I said, you know, how would you like us to handle your body, right? And this was kind of a new question for me to ask folks. I just kind of started really cutting my teeth on the grittier parts of death. And she replied as cheerfully as possible, you know, I think I'm going to choose cremation. I think we're going to go with cremation. But she seemed pretty half-hearted about it. And so I said, but what would be a really good death? Like, if there was such a thing, what could be a good death? And I could see this real fire and spark in her face. And she had a vision, and it was kind of cultivated in the last couple of weeks of her life. And we were able to have a green burial, and we did things that had never been done in our county before, which was really exciting. And Elizabeth had stepped in, and I didn't know her until then. And we connected around that. And then we got the opportunity to reconnect when Elizabeth was one of the first. I was out of state when my father had a stroke. And so in his hospital room were 4 very special people in my life that were the kind of people that show up when this kind of thing happens. And Elizabeth was one of them. And so we've been reconnecting around that and staying connected through my father's passing. And so that's kind of that's our intro story. Would you like to add to that, Elizabeth?
I think, Pixie, we felt important to highlight those aspects of how we came to know one another, because I think it, at the heart of it, really shows what we're talking about today, which is how do we create these threads of community and reliability, and sort of widening our circles of who are those individuals, those organizations, those beings in our communities that have the capacity to really show up and walk alongside of us, right, and our circles when things do get tough, or when those big questions emerge, especially in these territories of grief and death and loss, when a lot of times, right, we live in a culture that simply does not know what's possible, right, what our rights are, what the opportunities are, how we think out of the box, how we engage creatively to really be in life and in the dying process in the ways that we want. And so I think Pixie and I have had the gift of together kind of navigating these spaces. And so it's through our relationship that we are kind of here and speaking with all of you about some of these other topics related to grief.
Well said. Well, we've got a lot to touch on here. And so I also just wanted to note that when the folks who showed up to my father's death room came in, Elizabeth was called in because they were all composed of men. And they specifically said, we need some feminine energy in here. And so enter Elizabeth at 10 o'clock at night when she was just about to head to bed, knowing how important it is that we create a beautiful energy inside of the spaces where folks are dying when we have that opportunity to, and then to carry that forward, once death has become complete. I think one of the most difficult times is what happens after, who remains, who are we in contact with? And so we're going to kind of crack into that a little bit right now. Did you want to say anything else before I kind of kick us off with a reading? Okay.
Great.
Sweet. The Wound Makes the Medicine. I'm starting out. I know there are some folks in here who are attending who have the book. I'm on page 105. I'm just going to read a passage so we can have a springboard. The second paragraph says, I often imagine a great many of us choosing to honor the waters that flow through and cleanse our hearts, even when they are breaking or broken by past events. It is a courageous choice to move the culture along in an evolved way that encourages resiliency, but is not entangled in the fierce independence we've been conditioned with. We are moving on from inauthentic lone wolf states that seem to insulate us from further pain while actually causing us even more pain. People belong with people, and we are learning again how to be with one another. So in keeping with that, Elizabeth and I are always thinking about how to reimagine community, how to reimagine in a creative way, how to be together and show up for one another without a lot of personal drain. The more community we have around our grief, it seems like the less of personal energy we get to have to spend in there. So our question was, how do we co-regulate with each other, be in each other's presences, and hold a container in community for healing and grief? And my way of looking at it is like, how do we make bigger baskets for this? How do we start to really embiggen our baskets for holding our own grief? For me, when I experience grief, a big grief, it sets off a lot of other little griefs. And so then I'm tending the little plants and the parts of the garden that maybe I have laid down and neglected, but are asking for a little bit more. Do you want to speak to that, Elizabeth, about how you've experienced, keeping company with the kind of people who show up and what the kind of rigors of that are? What does that look like in your communities with peaceful presence?
Well, it's interesting we start with this just because that was so much of the reason that I got into this work, right? I had a really close death. My son died the day after a full-term pregnancy due to a true knot in his umbilical cord. And so I was in the center of this very unanticipated and sort of life-cracking loss, and found that there were people and circles of my life that knew how to be with me in that. And then there was also this fracturing that happened and this going away of so many individuals. And so, through my work in community development, I think I started to really think about how do we cultivate communities that have this capacity, this resiliency, this grief literacy to walk alongside of one another. And I think it's, I think there's not a way to do it. I think there are many kind of nuggets there. One, we have to just be willing to be in relationship with grief, to be an apprentice to grief in a lot of ways, right? We think, oh, I have the capacity to show up and be with, but if we don't start with our own grief experiences and really, kind of feel into what is there, how has this made me who I am today? I think that's a way of really kind of exhibiting trust without actually saying anything to anybody, right? I'm walking the walk in my own heart and being with my own grief, and in a way that's allowing me to walk alongside of you in a different way. I think we throw around the term, grief literacy a lot. We have this idea of this competency or this kind of comprehensive understanding of what grief is, and how to think about it and how to talk about it and what the language is, and all of that's really essential. But I think more than that, it's really about this way of how do we be with in grief, both with ourselves and others. And Pixie and I were talking earlier about sort of this like polyvagal theory that's really big right now, and this understanding of, with this model, right, you talk a lot about sort of the neuroception, this understanding that our nervous systems are these beautiful ongoing communicators between us, and that we're always kind of sensing into what's happening with others. And then this kind of co-regulation, right, that we're always, it's a biological imperative of sorts to be in relationship. And so I think that with the grief piece, we really have to take all of these kind of other ways of communicating into consideration and kind of do this fine tuning within ourselves that really helps us to think more, I don't know, more compassionately about how we be with, and how we do have the right to be selective in when it comes to who we're surrounding ourselves with. And I think I love, Pixie, you've got some great thoughts about, just the kind of the selection of community and what that looks like.
Yeah. My circles, when I'm experiencing a big grief, tend to get really small. I just pull my closest people toward me because I want to really talk about the details, the nuance, how it's woven in with so many other aspects of my life. Loss, as I said, just sets off a lot of learning, life learning, and the cumulative experiences that we have with grief, with our loved ones who are experiencing grief. It's ongoing. It's just like other forms of social competency, where there are going to be more and more and more. So not to train ourselves to be the smartest kids on the playground about things, but grief literacy sounds very formal, but essentially being with grief and being with ourselves through grief, knowing that it's not linear. There are going to be occasions in which it kind of rears up on us, making space in our basket for grief, letting it live here with us. I know some folks close to me who, the children in the household don't get to do a lot of things. They have to use a certain type of silverware out of the drawer, and, they can't sit on the couch and different things like this. There's a lot of restrictions. And I think sometimes when it comes to grief, we restrict ourselves in a lot of ways. And the systems that we live with and have to go to work and endure doesn't exactly make up space and time and energy for grief. So somehow we've got to work it in there, because it's here to stay. And each time I have a large grief, a particularly big one, it feels like a rite of passage, right? I wrote Prayers of Honoring Grief in either 2017 or 2018 and wasn't expecting it to make such a big splash, right? But folks, just as those who spoke in the chat today, needed words of comfort. And when we talk about polyvagal and co-regulation, it's like, what happens energetically when we're in each other's presence, when we're allowing ourselves to be in the irregular feelings of grief. It seems like a lot of changes have happened in the last little while, but I don't remember grief being spoken about. I don't remember it being encouraged. I don't think I even knew as a child what it really was until I got older. And when Brad was reading the bio from my website, I was like, there was a group of angelic elders who just sort of scooped me in and made a space for me. And they gave me language, and they gave me permission to be in a space, to not make any plans, to nurture myself, and also to receive, right? Because that was also not given to me in my upbringing. We could give to depletion, that was totally okay. But to receive was something that was a little bit not what we were doing. So I really enjoy language is my thing. I'm a writer. But I really enjoy cultivating, it's not safety, it's not security. Just like I said, let grief live here among us, and we know it comes and goes. And one day we wake up and the moon isn't just right. And, conditions are right for weeping, building an altar, lighting the candles, saying the prayers, doing the honoring, being quiet, reaching out, whatever it is, it comes and it goes, and there is space for this.
And I think, Pixie, that's a really essential element of grief literacy as well, is this knowingness that, right, our culture tells us that, things that are bad and are grief inducing are not supposed to happen. And there's an out of order if that is what we're, encountering that day. And how do we sort of flip that on its head and say, grief on the daily is a part of my life, right? And we see this around us, right? Things are becoming more and more intense and sort of grief infused in so many ways. And, so that question of how do we almost meet grief with almost a preparedness mindset as well, right? To say, how do I not overfill everything in my life to the extent that when something really intense or griefful happens, that I don't have the nimbleness, the capacity, the understanding of how I can also encounter and integrate that, right? That I can work with that. That it doesn't catch us off guard to the point where, it just takes us down because we simply don't have the space to breathe with and to dance with and to integrate it or converse with it in the ways that it wants to be. And there's very practical realities to that, right? Of just not overfilling everything. And I think that's grief responsible. Yeah.
Grief seems like it wants some things with us, not from us. It's not extractive. I'm going to jump into the page 108 because I think that's leading into some of what we wanted to talk about in terms of metabolizing grief and, noting what some of our basic needs are around that. This little passage is just the middle paragraph on page 108. It says, "There is tremendous fear around getting stuck with grief, and there are certainly times when depression sets in. Grieving so many events wore me down, and I felt the heavy cloak of depression around my shoulders. Much of this book began with notes in my phone when I wasn't able to get to pen and paper. I wrote depressed and then D-pressed, which felt like freedom from being pressed, which evolved linguistically into deep rest." And I thought, what an interesting play on words there. And what an interesting feeling to feel the massive weight of grief and to you mentioned earlier, and I really want to make sure I touched on this, like mobilizing a little bit around it. Like grief likes to move a little bit, so the fear of getting stuck. I mean, when I was writing this book and experiencing another grief, not my father's death, but it was a little bit of chop wood and carry water and then light the candles and light the fire and tend the coals and be with myself in that way. Some of our core values that we, and our basic needs actually, sleep, money, food, warmth, these human necessities that we can provide for one another, is a gift to those who are grieving. It's a gift we can give to ourselves. It's not baked into our systems of vocation and occupation. So I think that what we're finding in our little community here is that the way we said it was like, it's almost as if there's, when you're stepping up and stepping in towards those who are experiencing loss or experiencing grief, past or present, it's like, I envision it sort of like a bank. We make deposits into our communal grief basket, knowing that our time will come when we have to make a little withdrawal. We'll need someone to drop that casserole off on the back porch without knocking on the door. And so it's way beyond casseroles, obviously, but this providing value for the grieving, being of service, right? It's only been a couple of generations that we really withdrew into our single family homes and out of the village a little bit. Technology, things that have gotten too much, our willingness to overcommit our time, not to make space for grief. I think we're kind of like, we contracted into that, and now socially we're sort of expanding back out into like, we're missing this, we're hungry for this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we were talking earlier that our systems themselves are not oriented to lend themselves to rest, really to prioritize that, right? So it's interesting that we oftentimes think about grief as sort of this depressed state, this heaviness to it. And I always say that I think that the grief also inherently encompasses and requires a sense of the activist mindset, where we really are, right, as our kind of immediate circles, and then you go out to these other ecosystems of care that we can actively build around us, right? That it really is about reclaiming and reorganizing and reorienting to these things that really, really matter, right? That we need to recreate these ecosystems of care in the midst of, or in resistance to, these capitalistic structures that say there is no time, right? And that really has, in the first piece that you read about that kind of lone wolf mentality of having to do it alone. And so, I think it also brings up this good question of who am I keeping company with, right? The examples of that Pixie opened up with, right? This question of, okay, we as a community or my family has need, and then the wider circles, who has the capacity to be here with me, and will really, kind of take into consideration what is needed right now, and how can we provide you what you need. And I think also, Pixie, when we were talking earlier, you mentioned that place of required receiving that comes in light of grief, that we oftentimes are proud in being able to do it alone. And there's this really beautiful, tender underbelly reality of grief that oftentimes, surprisingly, opens us up to this other place of needed rest and community. And I think it's one of those inherent gifts that really can come through if we can pause long enough to really absorb it.
Yeah, thank you. I think of grief as the teacher, just like a mentor or a community leader. It's always teaching me. When I had, I think I was about 31, it's about 20 years or so ago, when I had a second trimester miscarriage, and it was very informative for where my life was going to be going. It was a blind side. I didn't know anything about babies not coming out, like I just had this expectation. And so my lofty expectation, the devastating news, this kind of swooping in of the grandmothers to really kind of take me in, that community was already built. But I didn't know in all of the ways that I was really going to need to experience that. But also, I felt like, I speak of the mystery, great mystery or creator in my family's tradition, in the Native tradition, as being in dialogue, being really close to that other world. Loss brings us closer to the edge of where our worlds start to split and become otherworldly. I felt like it would be really easy, and I felt this way a couple of times since then, but I feel like it would have been really easy to just pretty much go dark, like just let the lights kind of go out inside of me. And it's not that they didn't flicker a bit, but the community that was around me, it's like, I felt, I just describe it in this way. Creator sort of like flipped the lights on inside of me. And I feel like I made this vow in there somewhere that like, these lights will never go off again. This grief, darkness gives the light a place to live. And we see this with our sunset and our dawn coming up every day. We see it with the moon creating all this light for us to come to fruition and create with, and then it goes back again. We're in a dark moon today. So, nature is constantly showing us that this is how we do it, that we can let grief bring us to our knees in sorrow, and we can also let it brighten us. It's a teacher that way. It wants that for us, opening of our hearts. So I want to be mindful of time. There was one more little piece that I think I can work in here, if that's okay.
It's a beautiful transition, what you just said, to this third piece that you're going to read.
Okay, so this is page 125 in the section of the essay of letting go. And it says, with more intention, I have selected 3 ways to be of service to my community and address the priorities with which I do have some agency. Our immediate environments and their realities show us where we are needed. We do not have to rally for every cause simply because we are aware of it. It is too much. Identify your top areas of concern and decide how and where you can take action to help. Along with exploring the grief of your losses and the fullness of existence itself, pair these tasks with joy and peacefulness so that you continue to generate energy for the life contained in the one body you have. Earth demonstrates how to hold the complexity of constant transformation, yet she does not force the blossoms to come before the thaw. And the affirmation at the end of that section is, I accept that collapse is part of recovery and transformation. And that sort of got us thinking about how a seed goes back into the earth and it is quiet there. But then a wiggling starts, and then a little bit of warmth starts to happen and it starts to wake up a little bit. And this cycle of sprouting and blooming and flourishing and then going back underground, it's our nature. Lone wolf kind of isn't really a thing. It's always looking for its pack, right? That they're not that kind of animal, and neither are we. So, our static structures, as we found language for, doesn't really agree with that when it comes to big grief and loss. 3 days of bereavement, it's just not, it's not cutting it. If we have to work with that, how can we? How can we become creative in that sense? And how can we always be looking to nature to be in our, I want to say biology, but it sounds too scientific. How can we just be embodied around this? Allow ourselves, let go. It's okay to weep in the middle of the grocery store. It's okay to not answer the phone for a week. It's okay to call on people a lot, to take up space, to allow grief to help you take up space. What say you?
I think that's, very much. I really feel into what you were talking about in terms of, that our systems themselves don't necessarily have the capacity to integrate these beautiful lessons from nature, right? That collapse is inherent, that the pause, the contraction, right? There's a beautiful book by Joan Cacciatore called Bearing the Unbearable. And around grief, she talks about the expansion and the contraction that is always happening in relationship to, both the embodied relationship to grief and our understanding of it. And I think that nature itself really, inherently demonstrates that expansion, kind of that sense of spring into summer and the openness and the light, and then the contraction that happens as things start to freeze and close, and that's a necessary part of really being with what is. And so I think it just also, kind of invites us to think about in our own kind of apprenticeship with that which is around us. How do we integrate nature as a big teacher when it comes to grief? And, knowing that, as you said so beautifully, Pixie, that the earth really holds how the complexity of constant transformation. What does that look like, right? That there can be this coexistence of so many things, of the contraction and the expansion, of healing and brokenness. Right? Where culturally we're told it's either this or it's that. You're either well or you're not doing well. And so I think just being in nature, in love with nature, is such a balm when it comes to the grief experience, and just thinking about what does that look like in each of our lives to pull more of that in as teacher.
Yeah, to be more of nature. When my dad was actively dying right here to my right, just not even 2 months ago, he was in a pretty bad way post stroke, and I was feeling it all, just I had been dreading this my whole adult life, losing my beloved dad. He was just such a goodie. And so I pulled my twin size bed up next to his hospital bed, and felt him reach over with his one non-paralyzed hand and grasp onto me or pull me in for a hug. And There were other times that were so silly, and you know, that I was able to laugh through it. It just like I miss him terribly. I'll be in this for a while, but like my basket grew, 15 sizes just from being able to, you practice makes practice, right? So if 20 years ago I kind of got my initiation, and then a few years ago when I wrote this book, I lost a marriage that just opened up all the wounds, and then this, and I feel like it just gets richer and richer as I go. I never would have dreamed that I could have that kind of experience, losing, one of the top 4 people in my life that I didn't want to be without, and still don't. Um, but I think what this conversation really found us asking is like, what are we waiting for? And what are we hungry for? And what do we want to reimagine? What are we willing to talk to at least one other person about the kind of death that we want? It infuses my living life with energy. It's generative for me to imagine my own death, and to to be with it when it's really close to me, with my loved ones. So, gosh, we know we want some things to be different, and they are. It's happening. Like this space didn't exist many years ago, 20 years ago, when I may have needed it, and it does now. And so, like, there's evidence that we're doing better, and we're just continuing with that, and it's lovely and it's exciting. And of course, grief and death it's really hard. It's really hard when your life is impacted, your economic stability, your emotional stability is rocked to its core. It's hard, and we have each other, and we're meant to have each other.
Can I chime in for 1 sec, if I may? It's Brad from the outskirts.
Brad.
Hi. Thank you. First of all, what a beautiful conversation, and such a depth of understanding and curiosity around grief, and what it can teach us, and what we can learn from you and grief collectively. What you're just saying just now feels so ripe, and I just had to comment on it because in terms of the way that our world, or this space, or people might respond to grief. And I feel like that what we're all doing here tonight as part of this vigil, and what our real hope is, and I guess our belief more so, is that the way that we respond to grief is going to dictate really the future of our planet. In so many ways. If you think about all the things that are happening right now in the world, it just strikes me and us at Reimagine that there's only a couple responses that are possible. One is to just hold it in when something hard happens, just try to keep it all tight into our chests. And we know that is going to have some physical negative repercussions for ourselves and for our lives. We've learned from science that we can't just keep in our pain. So then what? Then we can either release it, and one way we can release it are in ways that hurt one another, and that seems to be what's causing a lot of the suffering in the world. People who have pain, and when release it in ways that hurt ourselves, hurt our planet, hurt our neighboring country, hurt our family, hurt our children, hurt our loved one, hurt ourselves. And then, okay, so we know we have to release it, but that's one way to release it. And then the other alternative is everything else. All the other beautiful ways that we can process what's hard. And it's not just therapy or being in a space like this. It's like what you just shared. It's how do we relate to nature? How we relate to the people that we love, how we relate to athletics, how we relate to spirituality and art and creativity and acts of service. There's so many ways that we might process our pain that we don't really learn about. And I think, Pixie, what you're sharing about how you, in the same way you can be with the four closest losses of your life, but at the same time be open to something new. I mean, that just seems amazing, and as a great model. So I don't know if you want to respond to that.
I mean, just yes to everything, and yes to keeping our hearts soft and open. And it's going to do its thing. It's going to try to constipate a little bit. You know, we know, like you said, that's not working out very well for us. What is working out better for us is to talk about it, to come together around it, to find time in nature, to be with it, to allow space for grief to live with us in our homes, in our hearts. Yeah, make room for it. It's here to stay.
And I'm looking out into the group right now, and I see Marguerite Johnson's screen, and I see three people.
Hi, beautifuls.
Maybe you know these folks. I have no idea, but three people gathered, together to participate, and there's just something so delightful about that, and regardless of what's going on in our lives, just to see people showing up in community. We're all in a community, but it's just something neat. We're here talking about grief. I mean, and yet we know that it's important. So
not just three people. This is three elders. So another thing that we will maybe have room to talk about a whole other time is in that lived experience. Being elder, that's where it's at. This is who we get to learn from, so honor them.
Thank you, Pixie, for acknowledging that. And that word was close to my heart to say. And then, I noticed myself not saying elder, but I do think there's so much wisdom, and we are learning it, in your tradition, I'm sure, is teaching us that is so important. In our broader culture, that's not something that we're taught. You look at TED Talks, and who's giving TED Talks? Young whippersnappers, in their 20s and 30s, when we really should be hearing from Marguerite Johnson and her crew, and for all the folks out in our little neighborhood here. So thank you for sharing that, and honestly, thank you. So I have some more questions for you, but maybe we'll have a chance later on to come back to something that's on my mind. But I want to thank you so much, both Pixie and Elizabeth, for just holding such a brilliant conversation and opening up our hearts in this session. And it's really the perfect trajectory to move us to what we're about to do together, which is an honor ceremony, where now that we've talked in such a beautiful way about grief and what it can do for us, or what we can do with it, and how we move and process, let's give ourselves the opportunity to express a little bit together. And with that, it is my really, really deep pleasure to introduce somebody very special to us, Chinasa Elue, a grief coach and end-of-life doula whose own journey through a toxic work environment and personal loss led her to become an advocate for grief-informed workplaces. She was a guest speaker in one of our Reimagine sessions, Pain to Purpose. It was last summer's series on career and life design. And Chinasa will also be co-facilitating an upcoming talk on our platform by and for underrepresented communities at the end of the month, to hold space for people who aren't often centered by the quote unquote majority in these conversations. So thank you so much. Chinasa, by the way, is a professor at I hope I don't pronounce this incorrectly, but Kennesaw State University in Georgia, and a consultant to organizations moving forward to make impactful changes in the midst of uncertainty with empathy and care. She's also the host of a podcast, Grieving in Color. So these are, amazing things that you're involved in. And what we are inviting you to do, and what you volunteered for, which we're so grateful for, that you will help usher in this honor ceremony to set the stage for all of us with some words. So the floor is yours, Chinasa. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And it's such an honor to be here with you all this evening, and for the amazing discussion that we've had already. It's really touched me in ways that I really can't even describe tonight. So thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for the Reimagine team for extending this honor. To kick off our honor ceremony, I actually have a poem that I wrote that I actually have never shared with anyone before, but I feel led to share with you all because it describes in context our conversation tonight. And so I'll share with you the title of the poem, and then I'll proceed to read it with you all, and we'll transition into our honor ceremony. The poem is titled "The Deepest Pain," and it reads, "The deepest pain I have ever known was knowing that I would never have an opportunity to say hello again or to hug your neck as I said goodbye. To not hear that sweet voice say, Ada, how was your day, my sweet daughter?" You see, my journey with grief began on May 25th, 2019. That is the day that my mother transitioned from this side of heaven until the next. It is in this transition that I became deeply, intimately, and unexplainably entrenched with grief. The grief I felt overlaid on top of every layer of my life. Like a cold, tattered blanket, it was there. In the depths of my sadness, I was unable to see a way forward through this hurricane-like storm. I found myself searching for ways to describe my grief, but words failed me. How do you describe the indescribable? You see, grief has a way of coloring the way you see the world. I no longer saw the world through a singular lens. My pain was too deep, too vast, too heavy to bear. So I sat, and I began to contend with the dualities of this journey called life. Grief has required me to slow down, to not rush, but to attend to the deep work required to make sense of my new world. So it is in the slowing that I began to make meaning. And I know that the deepest pain I know will remain with me until the end. But one thing I have uncovered in my grief journey is that being in deep grief does not mean the absence of joy. Unsubscribing from this notion that things must be black or white, but recognizing that I can live in the gray and reimagine a world where I can explore how to embrace joyous moments while my grief is still there. To release the guilt and to create space when both can coexist. The deepest pain I have ever known is still there, and I am leaning into the many lessons grief is offering me as I intentionally move forward. I wanted to share this poem with you all as we are talking about the ways in which we honor and pay homage to our loved ones. And I want to acknowledge here that even in the midst of our deep grief and our pain, that there's an opportunity in this moment to connect our hearts, our minds, and our bodies, to be in community with each other as we attend to our grief, and to lay down the mask and not pretend as if it's business as normal. This is an opportunity for us to simply just be. And so I want to share with you a quick quote from Bell Hooks that says this: "To be loving is to be open to grief, to be touched by sorrow, even sorrow that is unending." And so as we proceed to go into our honor ceremony, I want to invite you in the chat box or at the bottom or top of your screen to write the name of the person you'd like to honor or anything you'd like to share. And while you have this opportunity to honor them, we'll be playing some music in the background. Thank you.
Everyone, I just want to say thank you so, so much for first of all, for your vulnerability in your chats, and if you didn't share in the chat, in your heart. Just because the music has stopped doesn't mean that the music of our voices and our words in the chat has to stop as well. So if there's anything that comes up for you still that you'd like to share, or someone you'd like to honor, don't let the fact that we're speaking now stop you. These are just really beautiful shares, and our hearts are with all of you and all the people that you're honoring, and the emotions that are coming up for you in that process. I want to thank Chinasa for such a beautiful poem that was really, really powerful and vulnerable and really beautiful. And if anyone is out there and willing to, if we could share some gratitude for Chinasa, would be fabulous in the chat, because it meant so much to us to have you share that in this space with us. So thank you. Maybe if Elizabeth, if you might, would you be willing to just lead us in a collective breath? That's something you'd be, well, I can do it if not.
Did you say lead us in a collective breath?
Yeah, I feel like we just need a little breath as a
We
community.
do need a breath, yeah. And I love the 4-7 breath. The breathing in 4, holding at 7, and breathing out 8. I feel like it's when we're in this experience of, I mean, I'm feeling it myself, looking at this chat and just feeling the depth of love and loss and grief and everything else between, and really, feeling it move through my system. So I think if everyone's willing, I'll just lead us through the, and maybe even if it feels okay to you, for those that it's okay, maybe even just like closing your eyes and coming back from the screen, just relocating yourself in the midst of all that we have moving through us, our own grief, the collective grief, the particular grief. So just pulling back, feeling yourself wherever you are seated. And then we'll do an in-breath of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Holding at the top for 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then releasing a long sigh. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And just feeling yourself settled here. And then when you're ready, just coming back to the screen.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. I knew for some reason, I just felt that you'd be the right person to lead us in that breath. And I think it did feel really, really nice. And I think we all deserve a pause. We all taken one together, and it's just so nice to be with you all, sharing these things together. Now is the time where we are going to bring back a couple folks into our midst. Chinasa, Elizabeth, and Pixie, to lead us in our candle extinguishing blessing. And so each of you will read this one time, and all of us at our homes are invited to read along out loud or in our minds with you. And then at the end of Pixie's turn, I will count down from 3, and collectively we can all extinguish our candles. Now, I also want to just state in advance that if you don't feel called to extinguish your candle, that is totally okay. Some people prefer just to let it do its thing. And if you don't have a candle, I would just invite you to breathe with us, take a deep breath with us, and exhale together with us as a closing ritual of solidarity.
By extinguishing our candles, we release light into our world to keep alive hope and the memories of those we honor today and tomorrow and for the rest of our lives.
By extinguishing our candles, we release light into our world to keep alive hope and the memories of those we honor today and tomorrow and for the rest of our lives.
By extinguishing our candles, we release light into our world to keep alive hope and the memories of those we honor today and tomorrow and for the rest of our lives.
Three, two, one. Notice that I was still on mute and did it twice. We got 2 exhales there. Yeah, so here we are, and I have a couple more things to share with you, but want to thank everybody again. I do definitely, maybe we'll do it right now. I just have to ask before I move on, and because now we've called you out, Marguerite Johnson, your great square. I don't know if you know, no pressure, but just if you'd like to share, you know, what brought you here to this space tonight and what you're taking away. You know, we'd love to hear from someone out there, and you seem like the perfect candidates. If and given you know the elder wisdom that we're about to, no pressure, that we might get some. Let's see. Here you are.
What drew me tonight was my daughter, Elizabeth, and my friends, Peggy and Linda. All 3 of us are going through a deep time of grieving, and we know the meaning of love and support and showing up for each other. And if I could say anything about grief, it's let yourself cry. Just let yourself cry. I have the most beautiful garden in the springtime, and it's been watered with my tears. And as both Pixie and you and Elizabeth have said, it's an embodied experience. Trying to understand grief with your mind will only create suffering. Allowing yourself to have your body hold it is where the grace and the wisdom and the gift of grief comes from. Would either of you like to?
Yes, I would say that grief is trustworthy. It has our best interests at heart. And when we can surrender to its guidance and allow ourselves to not know, but to trust the flow that comes through us, there's a tremendous amount of grace along with the pain.
What was your name?
I'm Peggy.
Peggy, thank you so much, Peggy. Marguerite, what wisdom? Who is there one last closing?
Yeah, just to echo what has been expressed throughout the gathering, and that is, it's a task for the community. It's a journey for the community. It's an opportunity for the community. It changes community. It evolves community. It's unimaginable to do grief without community. And so thank you for the ways that you and your enthusiasm have, nurtured the gift of coming together.
And what is your name?
Linda.
What a square, everybody, honestly. Pixie, you were right about the elder wisdom. I mean, I don't know if we just hit the jackpot there or what, but I can see how Elizabeth, I'm assuming, Marguerite is now I'm assuming it's your mother. Am I making an assumption, a correct assumption here?
You are making a correct assumption. And I love all three of these women deeply. So it feels totally appropriate that they're a part of this circle this evening.
And I mean, I have to say, Elizabeth, I mean, since your mom is here and showed up, sometimes my parents have shown up in these spaces, which is always just feels so touching to me. I'm just wondering if there's anything you want to share. You don't have to, but is there anything you want to share with your mom or say about your mom, or I don't know, anything just coming up? It's kind of special that we have both of you in an intergenerational two-square approach here.
Well, I feel like all three of these women on the screen in one way or another are my mothers. As we said, the trusting the words of the elders and yeah, it is. I do really feel like it is the mothers currently that are guiding us in terms of knowing how to be with grief. And so, that how in our own individual authentic lives do we pull in the mothers, whatever that looks like, that sense of being rocked in our grief experience. And I'm just grateful to these three women that have taught me so much in the world. So I hope we all in one way or another can go and thank the beautiful elder mothers of the world.
What a beautiful, a really beautiful guidance for us as a community to thank the mothers without whom we surely would not be here. We know that, and without whom we wouldn't be able to navigate life in the way that, with the strength that we have. And so thank you to the mothers. Thank you for having, to see a dyad like you two here in this space. Just, it means so much. And those were such wonderful words. I'm very grateful that I just let us call on you and you responded. So thank you. That made the space so special. And just want to wrap up now with a couple things. If you liked tonight, if our vision at Reimagine and what our platform's set up to be is, yes, this is an event that's hosted by Reimagine, but every year there's about 400 or so events hosted by community members, just like the people who are showing up here, for your communities. And so if you want to host an experience, a vigil, a space to honor for your whatever community you're part of, a PTA, a community center, a school, a workplace, feel free to reach out to us at hello@letsreimagine.org. We have a toolkit that we've put together to help guide you to do something just like this with the slides and some other elements, some instructions that can get you going. And we're happy to help in any way we can. So if you reach out at hello@letsreimagine.org, if you want to try to help hold space and get more people in our world, opening up space for one another to just be with what we're all here with tonight. And yeah, so that's a wonderful thing that we've just finished, that toolkit. And I want to thank my colleagues, Dara and Andy, who were on the call that helped put that toolkit together. Really, Dara took the lead on that, and just thank you so much for putting that toolkit together for our community. Additionally, what we've been talking about here is really what's important that we're trying to make a difference in the world is this idea of narrative, that we all have a story to tell, that we all are on a journey, whether that narrative is shared publicly or whether we keep it internal. We know it's better to share, especially within a safe community. And so we want to help build that community together. There are these steps that are part of this research around what's called post-traumatic growth. Now, we don't like this term post-traumatic growth. Nothing has to be post. It doesn't have to be trauma with some kind of capital T, and there's no pressure to grow out of our pain. That being said, there are things we can do that kind of move us forward and move the world forward. And that is knowing that growth is possible, building emotional regulation and breathing like Elizabeth showed us how to do, for example, being able to share our stories in a safe space, then creating a new narrative for ourselves. And Pixie was pointing to this. Now what? What's opening up for us now? How do we build a relationship with nature? What new dreams might emerge? And then ultimately what the research points toward that is so helpful in healing is acts of service, creativity, and other positive actions in the world. And so this paradigm shows us that if we do these things, acts of service in the area of our pain, creativity, positive actions out of our grief, that actually heals the world and ourselves simultaneously. And so because social media is so broken, because we know that the way that we're telling our stories as a society is not really working, we are actually building a new platform to rewire social media from the ground up to create a healthy platform for healing and growth. And we're working on this so hard right now, and we need some folks to help us build it, to test it with us. And if you're interested in this, maybe Zubin, if you can chat, Zubin's in the chat, Zubin at letsreimagine.org in the chat. You can just text or share your email with us at hello let's reimagine, or right now at Zubin. We can keep those emails, and we can email you when there's an opportunity to test out this platform. We just tested it out with a bunch of folks who are going from a journey called Transforming Collective Pain into Active Love. They used the platform for 4 sessions and really were able to transmute this grief that we're feeling into some really beautiful healing journeys. And we want to make that accessible for everyone in the world if we can figure out how to do it. And that's why we need your help and participation. So go in your chat, and next is Zubin at letsreimagine.org. And we can get you at some point soon hooked up into that community if you are interested. And in that community, we go through those steps that I just shared on the prior screen. And the outcomes, this is the outcomes that we all hope for together. What does it mean to live fully through our grief? We believe living fully means increased personal strength, new life possibilities, deeper appreciation for our lives, improved relationships, and a deeper sense of purpose, spirituality, and ultimately community. We're not promising we can take away pain, but we are hoping that together we can live fully all the way through our lives. And Andy, I want to call Andy back in to share a little bit about some upcoming events that we have.
Sure thing. On January 18th, we have Room for Grief. This takes place every third Thursday of the month, and it's a space for those mourning all kinds of loss. And I hope you can join for that. We have our wonderful facilitator, Mangda Sengwan Peng. So please register for that. I'll paste a link in the chat when I'm done. Table Talk. I mentioned this before in the Zoom chat. If you loved Chinasa, you'll love her and her colleague, Dr. Julie Shaw, even more at this Table Talk to Reimagine a Year of Firsts. It's a gathering by and for BIPOC folks to reflect on the ways in which we navigate the first year of grief. Look for the link in the chat in just a minute. And I also want to plug our next Vigil. Please register for that. I'll put the link in the chat. It's on February 7th. Our special guest is psychologist and best-selling author Rick Hansen, who serves as senior fellow at the UC Berkeley Greater Good Science Center.
Thank you so much, Andy, for putting together and inviting such amazing guests tonight. The vision here is that we all experience so many types of loss. So grief comes from death. It comes from declining health diagnoses, loss of romantic connections, racism, the mass traumas. The question we're asking is, how might we both heal ourselves and the world? And that's the journey we want to go on with all of you who are here tonight, and you're already part of it by showing up. So I did write a really brief poem to our host this evening while you were talking. It just kind of dawned on me, and I wanted to share this poem. It's called a 15. It's 5 lines of poetry, each 3 syllables long. Except for the title, that restriction does not apply to the title. The title, I called it Grief Literacy, because I felt like that's what we were really talking about. And the poem is thus, and to Pixie, to Elizabeth, and to Chinasa. It's more than grief literacy. It's more than a term. Grief, a guide. You teach us that, hearts teach us. And I don't know, that's what I was really feeling from tonight, that the grief, that there's some bigger teacher out there, and you are part of that soul, the 3 of you, and we were all feeling your incredible wisdom. So, for Pixie and for Elizabeth, I know we asked folks to share some love for Chinasa in the chat, but if you wouldn't mind just sharing some words of gratitude to Pixie and to Elizabeth, for blessing us with your presence this evening, and Elizabeth blessing us with your mom. That would be really, really sweet as well. Thank you so much. And, Pixie, do you have any last thing you want to share with us? We haven't heard from you in a little bit. Any takeaways?
Oh gosh, I mean, what a wonderful space. This table talks is wonderful. I feel very inspired to gather again with this community. Just think it's the whole point of mine and Elizabeth's discussion is, grow that big basket, make a big space for it, and then it's here, it's happening, and and creating that, or finding out the people in your community who are doing that, becoming more acquainted with your healers, mothers, elders, grief tenders in community it's just never a bad idea, right? We need to know who each other is, and caregivers need care, and mothers need mothering, and friends need friending, and healers need healing, and so we get to keep that beautiful cycle that nature demonstrates going. So I'm just very grateful to have been asked to do this and to be in this space. Yeah, just gratitude and lots of love for everyone.
Thank you so much. And I want to share a thank you to the Reimagine staff and really to all of you for showing up. Here's a little poem for you. Thank you. Every month, sad but glad, to mourn, grieve, grow and love together. So that's an invitation for you to come back to the space next month to make this a ritual. I'm wondering, Chinasa, I know we're wrapping up right now, but the event that you're doing, I know it's for the BIPOC community. Are folks from not BIPOC folks invited to attend and bear witness in some form or fashion to the event, or is it exclusive? I just want to see if I heard some enthusiasm for it. I just want to set the record straight one way or the other.
Sure. And actually, I might deflect to Andy to provide some insight here. We're excited to host the event. We think honestly it applies to all people, but I know that the space itself was specifically asked to be created for BIPOC populations. So I'll let Andy maybe perhaps provide some insight there.
Sure thing. Like most table talks, we center the voices and experiences of underrepresented communities, but everyone is welcome to witness, learn, and listen.
And I thank you, Andy. And I was hoping you would just say that, because I think it's a really wonderful opportunity for people who are often centered to be in a different relationship to community. And so I really encourage folks to attend Chinasa's event. Thank you so much again for that. And all right, so we've come to the end of our time together. And as we like to do here at Reimagine, we've said this before, there's only one word that sounds good on Zoom, and that word is love. I don't know if we can say these words individually, but only love sounds good together as cacophonic. I don't know how to even say that word. As a cacophony of sounds, if we all say the word love simultaneously as a goodbye, it will sound good. If we sing it out 10 times, say it in repeated fashion, it just sounds good to the ear. So let's all unmute ourselves, get all of our voices in the room, and on the count of 3, we can say goodbye together tonight with the word love. 3, 2, and a 1. Love. 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 I don't hear that much love.
Wait.
This is the least. We all say it together. Okay, we're on unmute
Now
ourselves.
you can unmute.
We're just gonna sing the word love now. Maybe people can't unmute. Maybe that's okay. 3, 2, 1. Goodbye. Love for the ages. Love.
Love.